All right, so there's a lot here.
Which part?
Well, with the Nathaniel Lowe stuff.
Yeah.
Well, first off, what does it mean for Manzardo is number one.
Yeah.
I would think that's got to be the immediate question. Number two, it's odd because he, with the Joe Adell stuff, they went for such a power type thing. Nathaniel Lowe, historically not the biggest power bat in the world.
Yeah,
but
like a career high at 27 home runs, and that was like 3 years ago.
He still is slugging almost 500, which again would be, I think he's 480 right now as a slugging percentage. That's like 80 points higher than the second best player in the Guardians if you take out Joe Adell, who they acquired.
The Cleveland Guardians just did something that almost nobody expected. For weeks, fans questioned whether this front office would actually make a move or simply ride out the season with the same struggling lineup. But at the deadline, everything changed. The Guardians didn't just add one player. They completely reshaped their roster by bringing in Nathaniel Lowe, Joe Adell, Foster Griffin, and another bullpen arm, sending one clear message to the rest of baseball. The question now isn't whether they made moves. The real question is, did they do enough to become a legitimate playoff threat? Let's break it all down. Coming into the trade deadline, expectations were pretty low. Most Guardians fans have seen this story before. The front office has often been criticized for playing it safe, avoiding blockbuster deals, and relying almost entirely on internal development.
So there's an interesting little divide here. He's not known for his power in the slightest bit. He is definitely more of a 7-8 pitch at bat type player and the guy that the Guardians typically would like. But ultimately, they're shaking it up, and that's the important part here. And does it cost Manzardo his job potentially? I don't know. We'll see how they shake all this stuff out. But ultimately, they're making the moves to get better. They added 2 different bats that are going to have an actual impact on this team.
That's why so many people expected another quiet deadline. Instead, the Guardians shocked everyone. They added multiple major league players who immediately improve different parts of the roster. According to the discussion in today's transcript, that's exactly what many fans have been asking for all season. Not because these players are superstars, but because the organization finally acknowledged something that couldn't be ignored any longer. One of the biggest acquisitions was first baseman Nathaniel Lowe. At first glance, some fans might wonder if this is really the impact bat Cleveland desperately needed. After all, Lowe has never been known as one of baseball's biggest home run hitters.
In addition to adding a left-handed starter. And so I don't know how you can be mad at this, guys. You guys wanted to shake up this roster, shake up this team. They did it.
So we still don't have the price on Nathaniel Lowe getting traded for by the Guardians from the Reds there. You mentioned the Manzardo. What makes the Manzardo part of this and the Rhys Hoskins part of this so interesting is that obviously you can't necessarily send Manzo down to AAA alongside David Fry because you don't want to impact the at-bats of Ralphie Velasquez.
He's known for grinding through at-bats, forcing pitchers to work deep in accounts, and consistently making quality contact. Those are exactly the kinds of offensive traits the Guardians have traditionally valued. The transcript points out something extremely important. Even without being viewed as a classic power hitter, Lowe's slugging percentage sits nearly 80 points higher than almost everyone already on Cleveland's roster outside of newly acquired Joe Adell. That alone highlights just how badly this lineup needed additional production. Sometimes improving an offense isn't about finding Aaron Judge. It's about raising the overall floor of your lineup. Nathaniel Lowe helps accomplish exactly that.
So, is there another trade to come? I know it was Nightingale made sure to let everyone know. They always do kind of sneak one under the radar. They being Major League Baseball, sneak a couple trades under the radar as well.
Yeah, I mean, no, definitely. And so, obviously there's just a lot of different routes that they can take this, right? There really is. And so it'll be interesting to see where they go. But, Nathaniel Lowe, that's one point was a Gold Glover. At one point won a Silver Slugger Award. At one point won a World Series with the Rangers.
Of course, every trade creates new questions. Perhaps the biggest roster question revolves around Kyle Manzardo. Does Lowe's arrival mean Manzardo loses playing time? It's possible. The discussion points out that Cleveland now has several different directions they can go. Maybe someone gets moved. Maybe another roster move is coming. Maybe they rotate players depending on matchups. Nothing appears set in stone yet. What is clear, however, is that competition has increased dramatically. Nobody's spot feels guaranteed anymore. And honestly, that's probably a good thing. Winning teams force players to earn opportunities.
He's been around the block for a bit, but he's accomplished a lot.
Well, and you've got 2 rentals, one in Foster Griffin, the other in Nathaniel Lowe. So you're not necessarily blocking people long term from this, but you are, again, like, I still don't have the highest hopes for this team because the way they've played. You got 36 games to make me look like a fool, though.
Yeah, I mean, you're at least giving yourself a little bit of a chance. Again, it doesn't mean, they didn't acquire 3 different versions of, 2 Babe Ruths and then a Cy Young. Like, that's not who that is, but it's just such a refreshing moment based off of what we've seen historically from this team. And the idea that Antonetti and co. are involved in these trades and are actively making moves and trying to get better.
While Nathaniel Lowe grabbed plenty of headlines, several people during the discussion actually believe Joe Adell could end up being the most important acquisition. Why? Because his upside remains incredibly high. Adell has always possessed elite athletic ability and tremendous raw power. The challenge has been consistency. Last season showed flashes of what he can become. The concern, however, remains his strikeout rate. The hosts make it clear that Guardians fans should expect swings and misses. A lot of them. That's simply part of Joe Adell's game. But here's the gamble Cleveland is making. If his recent improvements are real, the Guardians may have added one of the few legitimate power threats this lineup desperately lacked.
I can appreciate that. It's what I've always wanted out of them.
216-474-0092. The Guardians, as of right now, have made 4 deadline acquisitions. There was the Bo Naylor trade over the weekend that netted them one of the Brewers' relievers. There was Foster Griffin earlier this hour. Joe Adell earlier today. And then just moments ago, Nathaniel Lowe, first baseman from the Reds there. Now, you thought maybe you'd count him out after the 5-10 stretch.
Then there's Foster Griffin. He's probably the least flashy addition, but he might quietly become one of the most valuable. Pitching depth matters, especially heading toward the postseason. The Guardians don't necessarily need Griffin to become an ace. They simply need him to provide reliable innings. If Griffin settles into the 4th or 5th starter role, it creates flexibility throughout the rest of the pitching staff that allows other pitchers to move into bullpen roles where they could have an even greater impact during October baseball. The hosts also mentioned Cleveland's reputation as one of baseball's premier pitching organizations. Time after time, pitchers seem to improve once they arrive in the Guardian system. That history makes Griffin an especially intriguing addition.
He was supposed to be joining us tomorrow at 4:20.
And we still plan on that, by the way.
Yeah, we will double dip this week.
We have that baked in the books there.
This will not be in place of tomorrow at 4:20s, just so he knows up front. On the Wise Heart Right, we make it right. Call Kyle Rat hotline. John Fanta is excited. Welcome to the show.
How about this? Everybody always says, will Chris Antonetti do it? What's he up to? What's the Guardians front office doing?
Here's where the conversation becomes really interesting. Throughout the show, one theme kept coming up repeatedly. It's not necessarily that Nathaniel Lowe is an MVP. It's not necessarily that Joe Adell suddenly becomes an all-star. It's not even about Foster Griffin turning into a Cy Young candidate. The biggest victory is that the Guardians actually acted. For years, fans have begged the organization to be aggressive instead of standing still. This deadline finally felt different. Instead of watching other contenders improve, Cleveland joined the action. That matters, because even if every move isn't perfect, doing something is often better than doing nothing when you're fighting for a playoff spot. The American League remains wide open. No team looks unbeatable. That creates opportunity. And for perhaps the first time in a while, the Guardians decided they were going to chase it instead of waiting for next season. One of the biggest takeaways from this entire trade deadline wasn't necessarily the names the Guardians acquired. It was the message those moves sent. For years, fans have criticized Cleveland's front office for being too conservative. Every deadline seemed to follow the same pattern. Hold on to prospects, make a minor move, if anything, and trust that player development would solve every problem. This year felt different. Instead of sitting back, the Guardians attacked multiple needs in one afternoon. They added a first baseman, a power-hitting outfielder, another starting pitcher, and bullpen help. No, they didn't land the biggest stars on the market, but they finally admitted something everyone already knew. That honesty alone makes this deadline feel different. Throughout the discussion, one point kept coming up. The Guardians weren't trying to fool anyone into believing the offense was good enough as it was. They knew the numbers. This team had been near the bottom of Major League Baseball in slugging percentage, near the bottom in runs scored, and simply wasn't producing enough power to consistently compete. Those struggles made roster changes unavoidable. Instead of pretending everything was fine, they addressed the problem. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not dramatically, but they addressed it. And that's exactly what frustrated fans have been asking for all season. One of the most entertaining moments in the transcript came when longtime supporter John Fonta called into the show. He couldn't even wait until the next day's scheduled appearance. That's how excited he was. His reaction perfectly captured what many Guardians fans were feeling. He praised Chris Antonetti and the front office for finally attacking obvious weaknesses instead of standing still. He acknowledged that Nathaniel Lowe and Joe Adell might not completely transform the lineup overnight. But that wasn't the point. The point was effort. The organization finally showed urgency. In a wide-open American League, standing still can be just as damaging as making a bad trade. The Guardians refused to stand still. Even after all the excitement surrounding Nathaniel Lowe, several people on the show still believed Joe Adell could ultimately become the most important addition. Why? Because his ceiling remains incredibly high. He's still young. He's incredibly athletic. He has legitimate game-changing power. Yes, there are concerns. He strikes out a lot. There are nights when he'll look completely overmatched. But there are also nights where he can completely change a baseball game with one swing. The Guardians are betting that their coaching staff can unlock more consistency. If that happens, this deadline could end up looking much better a year from now than it does today. While everyone naturally focuses on hitters, Cleveland also strengthened another important area: starting pitching depth. Foster Griffin may never become the ace of the rotation. He doesn't have to. The discussion points out that if Griffin simply becomes a dependable fourth or fifth starter, the entire pitching staff benefits. Suddenly, pitchers who were previously starting games can shift into bullpen roles during a playoff series. That creates flexibility. It strengthens relief depth. It gives manager Stephen Voigt more options every single night. For a team built around pitching, that's a major advantage. Another fascinating discussion centered around ownership. Some fans wondered whether these aggressive moves were influenced by the incoming ownership group. Nobody knows for certain, but it's an interesting possibility. The thought process goes something like this. If new ownership is eventually taking over, the current front office wants to show they're still capable of building playoff teams. Making the postseason for another consecutive year sends a much stronger message than quietly fading away without making deadline improvements.